Madam President, it was 10 years ago today. President Obama walked into the White House Rose Garden and said he had an announcement to make. He made an announcement which changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people living in America. He announced the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Now we call it DACA. And with that announcement, I joined with, thousands of young leaders across this country and breathed a sigh of relief. Over the past decade, DACA has allowed more than 800,000 dreamers to remain in the only home they've ever known, America. These young people we call dreamers came to this country as children, some as young as a few months old. They grew up studying in our classrooms. They grew up befriending our children and grandchildren. They went to church with us, and when they were kids, every morning they stood up in that classroom and pledged allegiance to that flag. And the reason they did it, of course, is they believed it was their flag. In the years since DACA was announced, a lot has changed in the world. Presidents have come and gone, wars have ended, and a once-in-a-century pandemic has rocked the world. But in the face of all these changes and upheavals, one thing remained steady, constant, and predictable: the devotion of dreamers to America. These young people have demonstrated an unwavering commitment to America. They served as our school teachers, first responders, members of the military, essential workers in the pandemic. More than 200,000 DACA recipients were classified by our government as essential critical infrastructure workers during the pandemic. 200,000 of them. And remember, they don't enjoy the benefit of a citizenship yet. Among them, 40,000 healthcare industry workers, doctors, nurses, paramedics. Over the years, I've come to the floor of the Senate over 125 different times to tell the stories of the dreamers. These stories show us what is at stake when we consider the fate of DACA and the DREAM Act. Today, I want to tell you the story of Yasmin Ruiz. She's the 130th dreamer story that I've told on the Senate floor. This is a photograph of Yasmin. She arrived in this country at the age of 3, along with her twin sister and her mom. And even though her extended family remained in Mexico, she said she never felt alone growing up in Arizona because we were surrounded by community. But when Yasmin was 16, the family suffered a tragedy that ignited her passion for medicine. Her mother had a stroke. And when the family arrived at the hospital, they were shocked to discover that none of the healthcare providers spoke Spanish. At a young age, Yasmin, who was grappling with the trauma and fear that her mother might die, was forced to play the role of interpreter and translator to save her mother's life. It was at that moment, even as a terrified 16-year-old, that Yasmin resolved to become a healthcare hero if her mom needed her. She studied hard in high school. She graduated with honors. She made her way to the University of New Mexico, where she earned a Bachelor of Science in Biology and Spanish. Yasmin then matriculated to the University of New Mexico's School of Medicine. But then she hit a speed bump. She discovered that her immigration status was going to stop her from receiving a professional license to practice medicine. Her dream was interrupted. What did she do? She said no way. She wouldn't accept no for an answer. She joined a coalition of like-minded students and rallied support in the New Mexico legislature to change the state law on licensure. Now, Yasmin Ruiz is fulfilling her childhood dream every day. She delivers care and support to families like her own and offers the guidance that she once sought as a teenager lost in our healthcare system. Yasmin's in the 3rd year of her general surgeon residency at the University of New Mexico. And at the height of the pandemic, she was deep in the trenches of our healthcare system. Back in the summer of 2020, when COVID was new and basically unknown, Yasmin was working 80 hours a week, providing daily care to COVID-positive patients, performing CPR, wearing protective gear from head to toe. Like so many dreamers, Yasmin's commitment to serving her community was unshakable. Even when her own family members came down with COVID, she didn't stay home and take care of them. She went to work. Day after day, she put her life on the line to save the lives of others. And she's continued that journey as a healthcare professional against improbable odds. Yasmin considers it, quote, a privilege and an honor to serve America in the midst of an unprecedented public health crisis. I want to thank Yasmin Ruiz for her service on the front lines of the coronavirus pandemic. She is an immigrant health hero. She is a DACA health hero. She's put herself and her family at risk to protect American lives. She shouldn't also have to worry about whether she's going to be deported tomorrow and whether her family will be deported as well. Think about that for one moment. This young woman, against all the odds, is pursuing her residency in surgery. She's determined to serve this nation and to make people's lives better. And what is our response, our official government response? Sorry, you're not a citizen. And under the current law, you never will be. So you ask yourself, what are we thinking? If a quality, contributing person like Yasmin Ruiz is willing to defy the odds and to risk everything to be a doctor, why aren't we applauding that, rewarding that, giving her an incentive and others like her to be a generation of service to America? Basic question we have to ask. Would we be a better nation, a better country if we deported Yasmin Ruiz? I hope, Madam President, the answer is pretty obvious. It is to me. Over the past 20 years or more, I've had the privilege of sharing more than 100 stories like Yasmin's on the floor of the Senate. The stories of dreamers who've given everything they can to America and who have more than earned their place in America's story. Yet these brilliant young people are still waiting on us, on Congress, to finish the job that President Obama started with DACA. This program was always supposed to be a temporary solution. 10 years ago, we knew that. The permanent solution was enacting a piece of legislation that I introduced 20 years ago called the DREAM Act. It provides a path to citizenship for dreamers, including young immigrants eligible for DACA. Congress has been on the cusp of passing the DREAM Act for years. In 2013, we included it in a larger immigration package that passed the Senate with 68 votes. It was a glorious day. Can you imagine that? 68 votes in the Senate for anything? And that broad bipartisan support reflected America's public opinion that the DREAM Act was the right thing to do. In fact, over the years, dreamers have become a household word. When we came up with the name for this legislation over 20 years ago, and you said the word dreamers, people would say, oh, I know that. That's a rock group, a British rock group. And it might have been Freddie and the Dreamers. But that wasn't the group that we were describing at all. These dreamers have touched the hearts of America because in the dreamers we see our own history as a nation of immigrants. We know that they deserve permanent status in this country, their home, they've earned it. But time and again, the Senate has failed DACA recipients. Instead of making these protections permanent, we have left them in doubt. The former president of the United States, Donald Trump, even attempted to terminate the DACA program, to turn people like Yasmin Ruiz away from this country. Can you imagine what that would have meant to her, to her family, to New Mexico, to America? For all the Americans whose lives have been saved by dreamers like Yasmin, or for the nation's classrooms and businesses who count on these idealistic, hardworking people who want to be part of our future? And our failure to protect dreamers is not only a human disaster, it's an economic disaster. It doesn't add up. DACA recipients and their households pay more than $5 billion in federal taxes, more than $3 billion in state and local taxes every single year. That's money that funds the construction of roads and bridges, pays Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And the economic upside of enacting the DREAM Act is even bigger. Last year, the House passed the Bipartisan Dream and Promise Act. If the Senate just followed their lead and passed that legislation today, we could increase America's GDP by nearly $800 billion over the next decade and create hundreds of thousands of jobs in the process. Our broken immigration system is embarrassing. It's failing America, and it's failing our families. It's also failing our economy. And beyond the DREAM Act, economists on both sides of the political spectrum agree. Comprehensive immigration reform would boost our economic growth and help to ease inflationary pressures in the United States. The United States Chamber of Commerce has even called for doubling the number of legal immigrants in America to address the worker shortage and in turn help alleviate inflation. With the DREAM Act, we're talking about a bipartisan measure that is very simple in scope. It allows young people who have grown up in America to continue contributing to our future. For decades now, Dreamers have been stuck in legislative purgatory. Only a subset of them have been able to secure DACA protections. And even for those who do, they have to renew their status every 2 years, which means they can only plan their lives in uncertain 2-year increments. That's unfair. No, it's cruel. Dreamers are living with the sword of Damocles hanging over their head. In the coming weeks, a federal court could strike down DACA and deport these young people to countries they barely remember, if they remember at all. Just last year, a federal judge in Texas limited the program to only renewing applications. That ruling was wrong. It excluded a whole generation of dreamers from stepping out of the shadows of our broken immigration system. If there's one lesson we can learn from the bipartisan gun safety framework that's being debated this week in Washington, it's that the members of this Senate are not as divided as the American people think. We can come together to support common sense policies that secure a brighter future for America. That's exactly the opportunity we have with the DREAM Act. I can think of no better way to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of DACA than by finally passing this legislation, offering every one of our amazing dreamers the path to American citizenship which they deserve and which they have earned. An overwhelming bipartisan majority of voters want Congress to pass the DREAM Act. They know it will dramatically grow our economy and strengthen our nation. Most importantly, it's the right thing to do. It's time for Congress to step up and meet our responsibility. Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike. Let's get this done. Madam President, I yield the floor.